The morning sun spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of Elena Harper's Seattle penthouse, casting a warm golden glow across the sleek hardwood floors. She sat at the kitchen island, her fingers tracing the edges of a thick, luxurious envelope that had arrived in the mail the day before. The paper was heavy, cream-colored, with elegant silver lettering that shimmered faintly in the light. It was an invitation to Lily Carter's birthday party, set to take place at a sprawling estate in Beverly Hills, California. Elena's heart gave a small, nostalgic flutter as she read the name again. Lily Carter, her best friend from college, the girl who'd once been her confidant. Her partner in crime during late-night study sessions and impromptu road trips across the Pacific Northwest. They'd been inseparable back then, sharing secrets over cheap coffee in their dorm, dreaming of futures that seemed so far away. But life had pulled them apart over the years. Lily had moved to Los Angeles, chasing a glamorous career in event planning, while Elena had stayed in Seattle, building a quieter life. The invitation felt like a bridge to that past, a chance to reconnect, and Elena couldn't help but smile at the thought. Maybe Lily missed her too. Maybe this was her way of reaching out. Elena sipped her coffee, the rich aroma grounding her as she studied the invitation's details. The event promised to be extravagant: black tie, live music, a catered dinner at a mansion that screamed wealth and exclusivity. She knew the place well, though she'd never told Lily that. The Beverly Hills estate belonged to her and her husband, Ethan Caldwell, a real estate billionaire whose name was synonymous with power in the Pacific Northwest. They'd bought the property 2 years ago as an investment, one of many in Ethan's vast portfolio. When Lily had mentioned struggling to find a venue for her milestone birthday, Elena had quietly arranged for her to use the estate. She hadn't bragged about owning it or mentioned Ethan's involvement. She'd simply called her husband and asked if it was okay. And he'd agreed without hesitation. "If it makes you happy, Elena, she can have the place," he'd said, his voice warm over the phone. That was Ethan, always supportive, always willing to move mountains for her, even if she only asked for a pebble. She set the invitation down and glanced across the kitchen, where Ethan was scrolling through his tablet, his brow furrowed in concentration. He was dressed in a crisp white shirt, sleeves rolled up, his dark hair slightly tousled from running his hand through it, a habit when he was deep in thought. Ethan was always working, always planning, his mind a constant chessboard of deals and strategies. But he never made Elena feel like an afterthought. She cleared her throat softly. "Ethan, look at this," she said, sliding the invitation across the island. He glanced up, his gray-green eyes meeting hers with that quiet intensity that still made her heart skip after 5 years of marriage. "Lily's birthday party," she explained, her voice light but tinged with excitement. "You remember her, right? From my college days at UW. Ethan set his tablet aside, giving her his full attention. "The one who used to drag you to those open-mic poetry nights?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. Elena laughed, nodding. "That's her. She's turning 30, and she's throwing this big party in Beverly Hills. I'm thinking about going." There was a pause, and she caught the subtle shift in Ethan's expression. Something careful, almost guarded. "You sure you want to go?" he asked, his tone measured, like he was weighing her words. "It's been a while since you two talked, hasn't it?" Elena shrugged, brushing off the faint unease his question stirred. "Yeah, but that's why I want to go. I miss her, Ethan. I miss having friends who knew me before all this." She gestured vaguely at the penthouse, the marble countertops, the designer furniture, the view of Puget Sound glittering in the distance. It was a life she'd never imagined for herself, back when she and Lily were scraping by on instant noodles and student loans. Ethan reached across the island, his hand closing over hers, warm and steady. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone, Elena," he said softly. "You know that, right?" His words hit a nerve, though she didn't want to admit it. Ethan knew her better than anyone, knew how hard it had been for her to adjust to their wealth, to the way people's eyes changed when they learned who she was married to. She'd always been careful not to flaunt it, to keep her life as Elena Harper, the literature major who loved thrift stores and volunteering at children's libraries, separate from Elena Caldwell, wife of a billionaire. She wanted people to see her for who she was, not what she had. "I know," she said, squeezing his hand back. "I just want to see Lily, have a normal night, be myself for a change." Ethan's smile softened, and he leaned forward, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Then, go be yourself. That's all you ever need to be." He left for a business trip later that morning, some deal involving a commercial property in Portland. As he grabbed his jacket, he turned to her, his expression serious. "Call me if you need anything, okay? Anything at all." Elena rolled her eyes playfully. "It's just a birthday party, Ethan. What could go wrong?" He chuckled, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes. Concern, maybe, or intuition. She brushed it off, watching as he headed out the door, his driver waiting downstairs. Alone now, Elena turned her attention to preparing for the party. She spent the afternoon working on a gift for Lily, something personal and meaningful. She'd always been good with her hands, a skill honed from years of crafting as a kid. In her home office, surrounded by bookshelves and soft natural light, she painstakingly created a hand-painted canvas, a collage of memories from their college days. There was the old diner they'd frequented, its neon sign glowing in her watercolor strokes. The Space Needle at dusk, where they'd once snuck up to watch a sunset. And a sketch of the two of them laughing under a cherry blossom tree on campus. Beside each image, she wrote small notes in her neat, looping handwriting. "Remember when we got kicked out of the diner for singing too loud? You swore you'd marry that barista, but he spilled coffee on your shoes." Hours slipped by as she worked, the act of creating grounding her, filling her with a quiet joy. This was her way of saying, "I remember us. I remember who we were." When she finished, she stepped back, admiring the canvas. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, heartfelt, the kind of gift that carried weight beyond money. She wrapped it carefully in tissue paper, tying it with a simple ribbon. Then she turned her attention to what to wear. Standing in her closet, she bypassed the rows of designer dresses Ethan had bought her over the years, gowns she rarely wore, each one a reminder of the world she still felt like an outsider in. Instead, she chose a simple sage green dress, sleeveless and flowing, something she'd picked up at a boutique in Capitol Hill. It was elegant, but understated, the kind of thing that said, "I'm here for my friend," not, "Look at me." She paired it with minimal jewelry, a thin silver necklace and small hoop earrings, and let her dark hair fall loose around her shoulders. Looking in the mirror, she felt like herself, not the polished wife of Ethan Caldwell, but Elena Harper, the girl who used to stay up late with Lily, debating books and dreaming of changing the world. The flight to Los Angeles was quick. A private jet Ethan had insisted she take, though she'd argued it was overkill. "Humor me," he'd said, and she'd relented, knowing he worried about her when he wasn't around. By the time she landed in L.A., the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. A driver took her to the Beverly Hills estate, and as the car wound through the palm-lined streets, Elena's breath caught. The mansion was breathtaking, even more so than she remembered. Its white stone facade glowed under the evening light, with ivy climbing the walls and manicured gardens stretching out like a postcard. String lights twinkled along the driveway, and she could hear the faint hum of music from inside. She knew Ethan had hired a team to maintain the property, but seeing it now, transformed for Lily's party, filled her with a quiet pride. She'd made this happen for her friend, even if Lily didn't know it. The thought warmed her, and she clutched the wrapped canvas tighter, excitement bubbling up. This was going to be a good night, a chance to rebuild something she'd lost. But as she stepped out of the car, a faint unease settled in her chest. The air felt charged, like the moment before a storm. She smoothed her dress, adjusted her grip on the gift, and walked toward the entrance. The double doors were flung open, revealing a glittering scene inside: crystal chandeliers, a marble foyer, and a crowd of guests dressed like they'd stepped out of a Hollywood red carpet. Women in sequined gowns and men in tailored tuxedos mingled with champagne flutes in hand, their laughter sharp and bright. Elena hesitated, suddenly hyper-aware of her simple dress, her lack of diamonds or designer labels. She took a deep breath, reminding herself why she was here. This wasn't about fitting in with these people. It was about Lily. Lily appeared at the entrance, her blonde hair swept into an elegant updo, her red dress hugging her figure like it was made for her, which, knowing Lily's new lifestyle, it probably was. "Elena!" she exclaimed, but her smile was tight, her eyes darting over Elena's outfit before settling on her face. "You made it." There was something off in her tone, a coolness that didn't match the warmth Elena had expected. "Of course I did," Elena said, forcing a smile. "Happy birthday, Lily." She held out the canvas, her heart pounding with a mix of hope and nerves. "I made you something." Lily took the gift, barely glancing at it before handing it to an assistant hovering nearby. "That's sweet," she said, her voice clipped. Come in, come in. Let's get you settled." Elena followed her inside, but the unease grew stronger. The guests turned to look at her, their eyes lingering a little too long, their whispers starting almost immediately. A woman in a glittering silver gown, Vanessa, she'd later learn, raised an eyebrow and murmured something to the man beside her, who smirked. Elena's cheeks flushed, but she kept her head high, clutching her purse like a lifeline. Lily gestured vaguely toward the back of the house. "Why don't you head out to the pool area?" she said, already turning away to greet another guest. "There's seating out there, drinks, you know, a nice vibe." Elena blinked. The pool area? The party was clearly happening inside. The music, the food, the energy all centered in the grand ballroom. But she didn't want to make a fuss. "Sure," she said softly, nodding. "I'll check it out." As she made her way through the crowd, she felt the weight of their stares, heard snippets of conversation that made her skin prickle. Who's she supposed to be? That dress. Did she borrow it from her mom? Laughter followed, sharp and cutting. Elena kept walking, her heart sinking with every step. The pool area was beautiful, with glowing lanterns and cushioned lounge chairs, but it was empty except for a lone server arranging drinks on a table. The man, older with kind eyes, gave her a small smile. "Early bird, huh?" he said, his voice warm. Elena tried to smile back. "Something like that." She sat down, the canvas long gone, handed off to some assistant she'd never see again. Through the glass doors, she could see the party in full swing. Lily laughing with her glamorous friends, the clink of glasses, the flash of jewelry. And here she was, outside, alone, the Seattle girl who didn't belong. For the first time, a small voice in her head whispered that coming here might have been a mistake. Elena Harper sat alone by the pool, the soft glow of lanterns casting flickering shadows across the water. The Beverly Hills estate hummed with life inside, the muffled sounds of laughter and clinking glasses seeping through the glass doors. She wrapped her arms around herself, the sage-green dress feeling thinner against the evening chill. The server from earlier, a man with graying hair and a name tag reading Carlos, had offered her a drink before disappearing to tend to the main party. She'd declined, her stomach too knotted to consider sipping anything. The excitement she'd felt on the way here had evaporated, replaced by a gnawing sense of displacement. Lily's cool greeting. The way she'd dismissed the hand-painted canvas Elena had spent hours creating. The whispers and stares from the other guests. It all stung more than she wanted to admit. She told herself to be patient. Maybe Lily was just busy hosting. Maybe she'd come find her soon, and they'd laugh about old times, just like Elena had imagined. But as the minutes ticked by, the isolation grew heavier. Through the glass doors, she could see the party in full swing. Women in glittering gowns moved like they owned the room, their diamonds catching the light of the chandeliers. Men in tailored suits stood in clusters, their voices carrying the confidence of wealth and status. Elena felt like an outsider, peering into a world she didn't belong to, even though, technically, this was her world, or, at least, her husband's. The mansion belonged to her and Ethan, a fact she'd kept from Lily to avoid making things weird. She wanted their friendship to feel like it used to, not tainted by the weight of money or power. But now, sitting alone by the pool, she wondered if that had been naive. A burst of laughter from inside jolted her from her thoughts. The glass doors slid open, and a woman stepped out, her silver gown shimmering like liquid metal. It was Vanessa Reed, the one who'd raised an eyebrow at Elena earlier. She was tall, with sharp cheekbones and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Behind her came another woman, Claire, whose emerald dress hugged her curves and whose auburn hair was swept into a flawless chignon. Both held martini glasses, their movements loose and confident, the kind of ease that came with knowing you belonged. Vanessa's gaze landed on Elena, and her lips curled into something that might have been a smile, but felt like a challenge. "Well, look who's out here," she said, her voice dripping with mock surprise. "You're Lily's friend, right? Ellen?" "Elena," she corrected quietly, her fingers tightening around the edge of her chair. "Nice to meet you." She tried to keep her tone friendly, hoping to diffuse whatever this was. But Vanessa's eyes flicked over her, taking in the simple green dress, the lack of jewelry, the way Elena sat slightly hunched, as if trying to make herself smaller. "Cute dress," Vanessa said, her tone implying the opposite. Claire snickered, sipping her drink. "So, Elena," Vanessa continued, sauntering closer, "how do you know Lily? You don't exactly fit the vibe here." Elena swallowed, her throat dry. "We were roommates in college," she said, keeping her voice steady. "At the University of Washington. We were close back then." Claire raised an eyebrow, exchanging a look with Vanessa. "College? Wow! That's nostalgic. So, what do you do now? Still in Seattle, chasing that student life?" The question was laced with condescension, and Elena felt her cheeks warm. She hated how small their words made her feel, but she refused to let it show. "I work with a literacy foundation," she said. "We focus on getting books to kids who need them. It's rewarding." She left out the part about the foundation being hers, funded by her and Ethan's wealth. She didn't want to give them ammunition or make this about money. Vanessa's smile widened, but it was sharp, like a blade. "A charity worker. That's adorable. So, like, you're out there saving the world one book at a time?" Claire laughed, a high, cutting sound that made Elena flinch. "That's so sweet," Claire said, swirling her drink. "I mean, it's not exactly what we do. Vanessa's a lawyer. I'm in real estate. But it's cute that Lily still keeps in touch with her. Simpler friends." The word simpler hung in the air like a slap. Elena's jaw tightened, but she forced herself to stay calm. "I'm just here to celebrate Lily," she said, hoping to steer the conversation away from herself. But Vanessa wasn't done. She leaned forward, her martini glass tilting dangerously. "Oh, honey, you don't have to pretend. We all know how these things work. Lily's moved up in the world. She's got connections now, real players. It's nice that she invited you, but—" She trailed off, letting the implication hang. Before Elena could respond, Vanessa's hand slipped, or seemed to slip. Her martini splashed across Elena's dress, the cold liquid soaking through the fabric and dripping onto her lap. Elena gasped, jumping to her feet, her chair scraping against the stone patio. "Oh my God!" "I'm so sorry," Vanessa exclaimed, her voice exaggeratedly apologetic. But her eyes were gleaming with amusement, and Claire was already pulling out her phone, snapping a photo before Elena could react. "Clumsy me," Vanessa said, dabbing at the air with a napkin, not actually helping. "You should get that cleaned up. That dress is, well, it's something." Claire giggled, her fingers flying over her phone screen. "This is going viral," she muttered, loud enough for Elena to hear. #CharityCaseChic. Elena's face burned, her hands trembling as she tried to blot the stain with her own napkin. The alcohol smell was sharp, and the wet fabric clung uncomfortably to her skin. She looked toward the glass doors, hoping to catch Lily's eye, praying her friend would come out and help, or at least acknowledge her. But Lily was inside, laughing with a group of guests, her red dress a beacon in the crowd. Their eyes met for a fleeting moment, and Elena's heart lifted, thinking Lily would come to her rescue. But then Lily turned away, her laughter louder, her attention back on her glamorous friends. The rejection hit like a punch to the gut. Elena sat back down, her hands shaking, the napkin crumpled in her lap. She felt exposed, humiliated, and utterly alone. The night grew colder, and a light drizzle began to fall, misting the air and dotting the patio with tiny beads of water. Elena shivered, but she didn't move. She didn't want to go back inside, not after that. The pool area was her exile, and she'd rather stay here than face more whispers and stares. Carlos, the server, reappeared briefly, his kind eyes softening when he saw her. "You okay, miss?" he asked, setting down a tray of empty glasses. Elena nodded, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, thank you." He hesitated, then offered her a small towel. "For the dress," he said gently. "And don't let them get to you. People like that. They're just loud, not important." His words were a small comfort, but they couldn't erase the sting of what had just happened. The drizzle turned into a steady rain, and the overhang above the patio offered little protection as the wind pushed the water sideways. Elena's dress was now soaked from both the martini and the rain, and her hair hung in damp strands around her face. She knocked on the glass doors, hoping someone would let her in to dry off. A few guests glanced her way, but no one moved. Then Claire appeared, her emerald dress untouched by the weather, her phone still in hand. She cracked the door open just enough to speak. "What do you want?" she asked, her tone impatient. Elena's voice was small, hating how weak it sounded. "It's raining. Can I come inside? I'm soaked." Claire looked her up and down, her lips twitching into a smirk. "The party's kind of exclusive, you know? Maybe you're better off out here. Or, like, you could just go home." No one's really missing you." She shut the door before Elena could respond, the click echoing like a final judgment. Elena stood there, rain dripping down her face, mixing with the tears she hadn't realized were falling. She tried to call Ethan, but her phone battery was nearly dead, the screen flickering before going black. The rain came harder now, soaking her to the bone, her dress clinging to her like a second skin. She sank onto a wet lounge chair, not caring anymore. The humiliation was suffocating. This wasn't just a misunderstanding. This was deliberate. Lily, her friend, the girl she'd shared her dreams with, was letting this happen. She'd invited Elena here, knowing she'd be out of place, knowing her new friends would tear her apart. The realization cut deeper than the cold or the rain. Elena had been a fool to think their friendship could be salvaged, to think Lily still saw her as anything more than a relic of a past she'd outgrown. The glass doors opened again, and Elena's heart leapt, hoping it was Lily coming to apologize. But it was Vanessa, flanked by another woman, Samantha, in a peach-colored gown that screamed designer. They were both holding fresh drinks, their expressions predatory. "Still here?" Vanessa called out, her voice carrying over the rain. "You're tougher than you look." Samantha laughed, pulling out her phone. "Hold on. I need this for my story. Wet dog chic, right?" She snapped a photo, the flash blinding Elena for a moment. "Lily's going to love this," Samantha said, typing furiously. Elena's voice was barely a whisper. "Why are you doing this?" Vanessa shrugged, her smile cruel. "Because it's fun. And because you don't belong here, Elena. Look at you. You're a nobody trying to play in our world." Before Elena could respond, Lily appeared at the door, but her expression was cold, devoid of the warmth they'd once shared. "Elena," she said, her voice sharp, "you're making a scene. I think it's time you left." Elena stared at her, rain streaming down her face. "Lily, please. What did I do? We were friends." Lily crossed her arms, her red dress vibrant against the gray rain. "We were friends," she said, emphasizing the past tense. "Things change, Elena. I've changed. This is my life now. And you're just not part of it." She nodded toward the garden beyond the pool, a dark expanse of manicured hedges and rose bushes. "There's a gate out there. You can find your way." Elena's heart shattered, but she stood, her legs unsteady. The rain was relentless now, and as she stepped off the patio, her shoes sank into the wet grass. She heard Vanessa and Samantha laughing behind her, their phones still out, recording her retreat. The garden was darker than she'd expected, the paths lined with thorny roses that caught at her dress and scratched her skin. She stumbled, her foot catching on a root, and fell hard into a muddy patch, the cold earth seeping into her clothes. The laughter from the patio grew louder, and she realized they were following her, their voices carrying through the rain. "Look at her go!" Samantha called. "Charity case takes a tumble." Elena's hands stung from the fall, and she felt blood trickle from a scratch on her arm where a thorn had caught her. She got to her feet, tears mixing with the rain, and kept walking, desperate to reach the gate, to escape this nightmare. But then she heard it, a low, mechanical hum, growing louder, cutting through the storm. It was coming from above, a deep, rhythmic pulse that made the ground tremble. Elena froze, looking up as the rain stung her eyes. A shadow loomed overhead, its lights piercing the darkness. A private plane, sleek and black, was descending, its engines roaring as it aimed for the wide lawn beyond the garden. The guests on the patio stopped laughing, their phones lowering as they stared in confusion. Elena's heart pounded, a flicker of hope igniting despite the pain and humiliation. She knew that plane. She knew who was inside. The rain pounded down on Elena Harper, each drop a cold needle against her skin, as she stood trembling in the muddy garden of the Beverly Hills estate. Her sage-green dress, now torn and stained with mud and martini, clung to her like a cruel reminder of the night's humiliations. The scratches from the thorny roses stung her arms, and her hair hung in wet, heavy strands across her face, blurring her vision. The laughter from the patio, Vanessa, Samantha, and the other guests still echoed in her ears, their phones capturing every moment of her disgrace. But the sound that now dominated the night was louder, deeper, a mechanical roar that shook the air and silenced the mocking voices. Above her, the sleek black private plane descended, its landing lights cutting through the storm like a beacon. The wind from its engines whipped the rain into a frenzy, bending the manicured hedges and scattering rose petals across the lawn. Elena's heart raced, a flicker of recognition sparking through her despair. That plane belonged to Ethan, her husband. He was here. The plane touched down on the wide lawn, its engines winding down to a low hum as the door opened with a hiss. The crowd on the patio, once so smug, now stood frozen, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. The rain didn't deter them. They spilled out from under the overhang, drawn to the spectacle like moths to a flame. Elena, still on her knees in the mud, watched as a figure emerged from the plane. Ethan Caldwell stepped onto the grass, his tall frame commanding even in the chaos of the storm. His tailored charcoal suit was untouched by the rain, as if the elements themselves respected his presence. His dark hair was slicked back, and his gray-green eyes scanned the scene with the intensity that made the air feel heavier. Behind him, 3 men in dark suits, his security team, followed, their faces unreadable but their postures alert. Elena's breath caught as Ethan's gaze found her, kneeling in the mud, soaked and battered. His expression shifted, a storm of its own brewing in his eyes, fury, cold and controlled, but unmistakable. "Elena," he said, his voice cutting through the rain as he strode toward her. The crowd parted instinctively, their whispers falling silent. He knelt beside her, heedless of the mud staining his suit, and his hand cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing a tear from her cheek. "What did they do to you?" he asked, his voice low but laced with a dangerous edge. Elena couldn't speak, her throat tight with emotion. She was shaking from the cold, the shock, the weight of everything that had happened. Ethan's jaw tightened as he took in her torn dress, the scratches on her arms, the mud caking her skin. He shrugged off his suit jacket and draped it over her shoulders, the warmth of it a stark contrast to the chill that had settled into her bones. "I've got you," he murmured, helping her to her feet, his arms steady around her waist. She leaned into him, her legs unsteady, and for the first time that night, she felt safe. Ethan turned to face the crowd, his arms still protectively around Elena. His eyes swept over the guests, who now looked less like glamorous elites and more like startled deer caught in headlights. Vanessa, in her silver gown, clutched her martini glass, her smirk gone. Samantha's phone was lowered, her face pale. Lily stood on the steps leading to the patio, her red dress vibrant, but her expression frozen, as if she sensed the tide turning against her. Ethan's gaze settled on her, and the air seemed to crackle with tension. "You must be Lily Carter," he said, his voice calm but carrying a weight that made everyone flinch. "The birthday girl who thought it was acceptable to humiliate my wife." Lily's mouth opened, then closed, her eyes darting nervously. I didn't know," she stammered, her voice barely audible over the rain. "There's been a misunderstanding, Mr." She trailed off, clearly fishing for his name, hoping to salvage the situation. Ethan's lips curved into a smile that held no warmth. "Ethan Caldwell," he said, and the name landed like a thunderclap. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Ethan Caldwell, the billionaire who'd built an empire in real estate, whose name graced skyscrapers and luxury estates across the country, whose influence was felt in every major city. Vanessa's martini glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the stone steps. Samantha took a step back, her phone now tucked behind her. Claire, who'd been lingering near the patio, looked like she might faint. Ethan pulled out his phone, his movements deliberate, and held it up for everyone to see. The screen displayed a series of documents, illuminated brightly despite the rain. "This estate," he said, his voice carrying over the storm. "The one you're all standing on, laughing and drinking in. This belongs to my wife, Elena Caldwell." He paused, letting the words sink in. "2 years ago, I purchased it as an investment. I put it in her name because she deserved it. When she heard her old friend needed a venue for a special occasion, she offered this place to Lily. She didn't brag about it. She didn't ask for thanks. She just wanted to help someone she thought was still her friend." The crowd was silent now, the only sound the relentless patter of rain. Lily's face was ashen, her hands trembling as she clutched the railing of the steps. Ethan swiped on his phone, pulling up another screen. "But that's not all," he continued, his voice growing colder. "This property has state-of-the-art security. Cameras everywhere. I've been watching the feeds since Elena arrived." He turned the phone toward the crowd, and a video began to play, projected onto the white wall of the mansion for all to see. There was Elena, standing alone by the pool, her face hopeful as she clutched the gift she'd made for Lily. Then Vanessa, splashing her drink and laughing. Claire, snapping photos and typing on her phone. Samantha, mocking her from the sidelines. The crowd inside, whispering and laughing as Elena knocked on the door, only to be turned away by Claire. And finally, the moment in the garden, where Elena stumbled through the thorns, her dress tearing, her hands bleeding, while Vanessa and Samantha recorded and jeered. The video ended with Lily's cold dismissal, her order to send Elena away. The guests shifted uncomfortably, some looking at their feet, others trying to edge back toward the house. Vanessa tried to speak, her voice shaking. "It was just a joke, Mr. Caldwell. We didn't mean—" Ethan cut her off with a look that could have frozen fire. "A joke?" he repeated, his tone deadly quiet. "You threw a drink on my wife. You mocked her, isolated her, and sent her into a storm to be scratched and humiliated. You recorded it for your amusement. That's not a joke. That's cruelty." He turned to Lily, who was now visibly shaking, tears mixing with the rain on her face. "And you," he said, "you invited her here. You knew exactly what was happening, and you let it unfold. You stood by while your friends tore her apart." Lily stepped forward, her voice desperate. "Elena, I'm sorry. I didn't know who you were married to. I thought—" Ethan's voice sliced through hers. "You thought she was nobody," he said. "You thought she was beneath you, someone you could use to make yourself feel bigger. You thought her kindness was weakness." He turned to the crowd, his gaze sweeping over them like a judge delivering a verdict. "My wife has a master's degree in education. She's built 2 literacy foundations that have put books in the hands of thousands of children. She's written articles on child development that have been published in national journals. She chooses simplicity because she values substance over flash. And you repaid her generosity with this. He gestured to the muddy garden, to Elena's torn dress, to the scratches on her arms. The security guards who'd been lingering near the patio, the ones who'd followed Lily's orders to escort Elena out, shifted nervously. Ethan's eyes found them next. "You two," he said, pointing. "You put your hands on my wife. You dragged her through a garden of thorns." The guards paled, one of them stammering, "We were just doing our job, sir. Ms. Carter told us—" Ethan raised a hand, silencing them. "You're done. Leave this property now, or I'll have you arrested for assault." The guards hesitated, then turned and hurried toward the gate, their heads bowed against the rain. Ethan turned back to the crowd, his voice final. "You have 30 minutes to get off my wife's property. This party is over. If anyone is still here after that, I'll have my team escort you out. And I won't be as gentle as I've been tonight." The guests scrambled, some rushing to grab their coats, others whispering frantically to each other. Vanessa dropped her phone in her haste, the screen cracking on the stone. Samantha was already halfway to the driveway, her peach gown soaked. Claire tried to slip back into the house, but one of Ethan's security team blocked her path, his expression unyielding. Lily fell to her knees on the steps, her red dress pooling around her like blood in the rain. "Elena, please," she begged, her voice breaking. "I didn't know. I was stupid. I was jealous. I saw you show up in that dress, so ordinary. And I thought you were still the same small-town girl I left behind. I didn't know you were this." She gestured vaguely at the mansion, at Ethan, at the plane. Elena looked down at her, the woman she'd once called her best friend, the one she'd stayed up with during finals, the one she'd lent money to when Lily's car broke down senior year. The pain of betrayal was raw, but Elena's voice was steady when she spoke. "You didn't need to know who I'm married to, Lily," she said. "You should have known me. The girl you laughed with, the one who was there for you. That should have been enough." Ethan tightened his arm around her, shielding her from the rain and the stairs. "Come on," he said softly, guiding her toward the plane. As they walked, Elena glanced back at the mansion, its lights still glowing, the party unraveling into chaos. She saw Carlos, the server, standing near the patio, his kind eyes meeting hers. He gave her a small nod, a silent acknowledgement of what she'd endured. It was a fleeting moment, but it grounded her, reminding her that not everyone in this world was cruel. Ethan helped her into the plane, his hand steady on hers, and as the door closed behind them, the roar of the engines drowned out the last echoes of the party. Elena sank into the leather seat, Ethan's jacket still around her shoulders, and let out a shaky breath. The night wasn't over, but for the first time, she felt like she could breathe again. The hum of the private plane's engines faded into a soothing drone, as Elena Harper leaned back in the plush leather seat, her body still trembling from the cold and the weight of the night's events. The scratches on her arms stung faintly, and her sage-green dress, now torn and caked with mud, felt like a relic of a battle she hadn't expected to fight. Ethan Caldwell sat beside her, his hand resting gently on hers, his thumb tracing small, reassuring circles. Outside, the rain-slicked lights of Beverly Hills receded as the plane climbed into the night sky, carrying them back to Seattle. Elena stared out the window, the world below blurring into a mosaic of glowing dots, each one a reminder of how far she'd come from the girl she used to be, and how much she'd forgotten about herself in the process. The humiliation at Lily's party, the cruel laughter of Vanessa and Samantha, the betrayal of a friend she'd once trusted. It all swirled in her mind like a storm that refused to settle. But Ethan's presence grounded her, his quiet strength a lifeline in the chaos. "How did you know to come?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper, still raw from tears and rain. Ethan's eyes met hers, soft but resolute. "I always check the security feeds on our properties," he said, his tone matter-of-fact but laced with a protective edge. "It's a habit. When I saw what was happening, saw you out there alone, saw them turn you away in the rain, I called for the plane and got there as fast as I could." He paused, his jaw tightening. "I'm sorry I wasn't there sooner, Elena. I should have known." She shook her head, squeezing his hand. "You couldn't have. I didn't even know. I thought she was still my friend." The words felt heavy, each one a shard of the trust she'd carried to that party. Ethan leaned closer, his voice low. "You gave her a chance because you're kind. That's not a weakness, Elena. It's who you are." The plane leveled off, and a flight attendant offered them warm blankets and hot tea. Elena wrapped the blanket around herself, the warmth seeping into her chilled skin, and sipped the tea, letting its heat soothe her throat. She thought about Lily's tear-streaked face, her desperate pleas as she knelt on the mansion steps, and the chaos that had erupted as the guests scrambled to leave. The story was already spreading. She could feel it. Someone had recorded Ethan's speech, the moment he'd revealed her as the owner of the estate, and it was probably racing across social media by now. But instead of satisfaction, Elena felt a hollow ache. She'd wanted to reconnect with Lily, to rebuild a friendship she'd cherished. Instead, she'd been shown a truth she hadn't wanted to face. Some people only value you for what you can offer them, not for who you are. Back in Seattle, the rain had stopped, and the city greeted them with a crisp, clear night. Their driver took them to their penthouse, a sleek sanctuary overlooking Puget Sound, its lights reflecting on the water like scattered stars. Elena showered, washing away the mud and the lingering scent of martini, and changed into soft sweats and a cozy sweater. Ethan ordered takeout from their favorite Thai place, a small act of normalcy that felt like a bomb after the night's ordeal. They ate in the living room, cross-legged on the floor, the coffee table between them covered with cartons of pad thai and spring rolls. The simplicity of it, eating together, no pretense, no audience, made Elena's chest loosen, like she could finally breathe again. "I keep thinking about what you said," she told Ethan, dipping a spring roll into peanut sauce. "About how I don't have to prove anything to anyone. I thought I believed that. But tonight, I let them make me feel small." Ethan set down his chopsticks, his gaze steady. "They didn't make you small, Elena. They tried to, but they failed. You're still you, stronger than they'll ever be." She looked down at her plate, her voice soft. "I wanted to believe Lily still saw me the way she used to. I wanted to be enough for her, just as I was. But she didn't. None of them did." Ethan reached across the table, his hand finding hers. "The people who matter see you. Not the mansion, not the money, not my name, you, and you're more than enough." His words lingered, and Elena felt something shift inside her, a quiet realization taking root. She'd spent so much of her life trying to hold onto the past, to prove she was still the same girl who'd laughed with Lily under cherry blossom trees. But maybe that wasn't the point. Maybe her value didn't lie in staying the same, but in knowing who she'd become. A woman who'd built a life of purpose, who'd chosen kindness even when it wasn't returned. She thought of Carlos, the server who'd offered her a towel and a kind word when she'd been at her lowest. His small gesture had meant more than any apology from Lily or her friends. It reminded her that connection, real connection, didn't need wealth or status. It needed heart. The next morning, Elena woke to a flood of notifications on her phone. The story had gone viral, just as she'd suspected. Headlines screamed across the internet. Woman humiliated at elite party turns out to own the mansion. Clips of Ethan's speech were everywhere, shared and reshared with captions praising his defense of his wife and condemning the cruelty of the guests. Lily had sent a string of texts, long paragraphs filled with apologies and excuses. I was caught up in the moment. I didn't realize how it looked. Please, Elena, let me make this up to you. Elena read them, her heart heavy but resolute, and then deleted them without replying. Vanessa, Samantha, and Claire had vanished from social media, their accounts gone overnight as the backlash grew. But Elena didn't feel triumphant. She felt sad, not for them, but for the friendship she'd lost, for the girl she'd thought Lily was. A few days later, Elena was walking through Pike Place Market, the familiar bustle of vendors and tourists grounding her in a way that felt comforting. She stopped at a flower stall, admiring the vibrant dahlias, when a voice called her name. She turned to see Carlos, the server from the party, carrying a crate of produce. His face lit up with recognition. "Mrs. Caldwell," he said, then corrected himself with a smile. "Elena, I didn't expect to see you here." She smiled back, genuinely this time. "Just needed some normalcy. And it's good to see you, Carlos. Thank you for what you said that night. It meant a lot." He shrugged, his eyes kind. "I've worked a lot of parties like that, seen a lot of people act big to feel big. But you were different. You didn't deserve what they did." They talked for a while, and Elena learned that Carlos was a single father, working 2 jobs to support his daughter, Maria, a bright teenager who dreamed of studying marine biology. Without thinking too much about it, Elena asked, "Does Maria like to read?" Carlos laughed. "She's got a stack of books taller than me." Elena's smile widened. "I run a literacy foundation. We have a scholarship program for kids like her. If you're okay with it, I'd love to help." Carlos's eyes widened, then softened with gratitude. "You don't have to do that," he said, but she shook her head. "I want to. It's what I do." It wasn't about the money or the gesture. It was about seeing someone, really seeing them, the way she'd wished to be seen that night. That evening, Elena and Ethan invited an old friend, Sarah, to their penthouse for dinner. Sarah was a former colleague from Elena's teaching days, someone who'd known her before the wealth and the spotlight. They ate homemade pizza, laughed over old stories, and played a board game until midnight. There were no cameras, no designer gowns, no need to perform. As Sarah left, she hugged Elena tightly. "You're still the same Elena I met in that cramped teacher's lounge," she said. "Don't ever let anyone make you doubt that." Elena hugged her back, her throat tight. "I won't," she promised. Later, as she and Ethan cleaned up the dishes, Elena found herself staring out at the city lights, her mind drifting. "I've been thinking," she said, drying a plate, "about what happened. I spent so long trying to hold on to who I was with Lily, trying to prove I hadn't changed. But maybe I don't need to prove anything. Maybe I just need to be who I am now." Ethan set down the dish he was washing and turned to her, his eyes warm. "You've always been enough, Elena. The people who don't see that, they're the ones missing out." She smiled, a real smile this time, not forced or fragile. "I know," she said, and she meant it. The lesson wasn't loud or dramatic, like Ethan's arrival in the plane. It was quiet, woven into the choices she made, to help Carlos's daughter, to surround herself with people like Sarah, to let go of those who'd hurt her. Her worth didn't depend on Lily's approval or Vanessa's mockery or the flash of a mansion. It was in the way she lived, the way she loved, the way she kept going, even when the world tried to make her feel small. As she stood beside Ethan, the city glittering below, Elena felt a peace she hadn't known in years. She wasn't just the girl from Seattle or the billionaire's wife. She was Elena Harper Caldwell, and that was more than enough.